Hello, all of you amazing women. Welcome to episode number 4 of 5 in our Creating Your Executive Brand series. Today, we are diving into common pitfalls that happen to us as we're creating our executive brand. In other words, last week we talked about what an ideal executive brand is. This week, we're going to talk about what it is not. All right, fair enough. So if you've missed any part of this series, I'm going to encourage you to get the workbook. Go back and listen to the previous episodes. We're sort of building on things as we move forward. That's how I like to do things, right? We're eating this elephant one bite at a time, but we've got to take the bites in the right order. So if you've been missing and you're just joining us, go back and listen to the previous episodes. I know that you will enjoy them. I'm getting lots of fantastic feedback about the things that you're learning through this process. I appreciate your feedback as always. Keep it coming. Let me know what questions you have. Sometimes I think it's clear, and I'm in left field and you are all over here in the right field, and I get some questions. So keep the questions coming. It's exactly what I'm here to do, is answer them. I also love the fact that many of you are going ahead and booking your free 30-minute brand assessment call, right? Your executive brand assessment call. That's with me and my team. We love to chat with each and every one of you. Keep those phone calls happening. It's free. And the link is here in the episode for you to make one if you haven't done that. We would love to chat with you and help you understand where your executive brand is, because that's the point. I want you to succeed. I want you to have a rock solid, high performing executive brand. That's what you want as well. You've got to have it. You know that you do. An executive brand is a must. So if you want some help, that's what we're here for. Now let's go ahead and dive into these common pitfalls. We've talked through a few of them already through the previous weeks, but I want to highlight a few of them, and then I'll talk through a couple of other pieces, and we'll wrap this thing up and get you back to your day. How about that? So one of the things that I called out in an episode a couple weeks ago, it was talking about our professional brand versus our executive brand. Do you remember that discussion? Well, we created a brand through our prior 9 to 10 years in our careers. And we were that professional leader. We were the manager. We were a director potentially. And we were the executor. We were the doer. And that's what our professional brand was centered around, right? Then we talked about the fact that an executive brand is not a doer. It's very different than the professional brand. It is an executive leader. It is applying executive leadership strategies in a way that only you can, because you're using your gifts and your talents in order to deliver executive level results, right? And so a common pitfall is taking that professional brand and trying to drop it into an executive level seat and thinking that that's going to move us forward. That will not work. And we've already discussed that. That is a common pitfall. Well, if it was valued in this role, if it got me to where I am today, then I should just keep doing it because it's going to help me be successful. That is a very common pitfall. It is not true. Yes, it got you here, but it's not going to get you to be successful. It's not going to help you be successful. It's not going to generate results at the executive level. You're doing two totally different things, okay? Right? It's like being in a triathlon. You're either running, biking, or swimming, but you're doing only one of those three at a time. And if you get out of the water and you think you're going to apply the same movements of swimming to the running portion or the cycling portion, you're going to fail. You will not even finish the race. And that's the same thing that we're talking about here with a professional brand versus an executive brand. You cannot pick up what you've done prior to and drop it in. Yes, I know you've done that in the past. Yes, I know that with a professional brand, you just raised the bar a little bit, but ultimately you kept doing the same things. I get it. But that is why this executive brand is so important for you to create, because it is so different. Your executive brand is intentionally different than the professional brand. So we cannot pick up the professional brand and drop it into the executive seat. It is common. People try to do it all the time. They start failing very rapidly. They recover because they learn quickly how to create and then strengthen their executive brand. But some don't, and then they have to go back to their previous role. They've reached max capacity. They don't know how to create an executive brand. They cannot be an executive, and it's just not meant for them. Now, I'm not going to say that's you. You can do that. But you got to know the difference between those brands, right? The other thing that we've talked about that sort of falls under the professional brand versus executive brand, and we talked about this last week, is trying to do a job that isn't yours, right? Be it in a completely different department, or be it the role that you used to hold prior to the executive seat. That is a common pitfall as well, right? It's again, trying to step into that professional brand because you know that added value. And so why not keep adding the same type of value just in this new seat? And it doesn't work. That is a very different job than the executive level job. And so we've got to create a brand new executive brand. Okay? Another common pitfall that I see regularly that women do is we believe in some capacity that we've got to have all the facts and we've got to have all the knowledge and we've got to know all the things before we start actively using our voice and speaking up to influence and drive change. Now, here's the deal. There are a couple things you've got to remember and know. Number one, the seat is already yours. Maybe you didn't feel ready for the role. Maybe someone tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, we're going to promote you into this position. And because you didn't actively seek it, you believe you're not quite ready. And so you're going to get yourself ready by learning all the key facets and attributes and key points of knowledge that you feel like you must have in order to be successful as an executive before you open your mouth and start actually performing in the role. And you cannot do that. That cannot happen. Number one, you will never ultimately feel 100% ready. If you do, it's time for you to get promoted, okay? So you've got to go ahead and start talking. There are things that you absolutely already know. If we talk about the example we used last week, right? Being someone in marketing, and maybe you were a director at that point, and then you got promoted to a VP level, or you were a senior director promoted to a VP level. You already know a lot about marketing. You already know the functionality of how the company works from a marketing perspective. You have a lot of base level knowledge from the organization on how the team works, on how it functions, on what a marketing team can handle and can't handle, and the overarching strategy. You have fundamental knowledge. You need to speak up and use that knowledge where it matters so that you can drive change and influence. The worst thing that you could do is to sit in a room where you feel like you don't have a voice, that you haven't yet earned your seat, and they're talking about a very specific strategy, and you're listening and you know that if you move forward in that capacity, it's not going to work. Because the way the marketing works, or the way that the strategy has been built, or whatever it is relative to what they're proposing, it's not going to mesh with how the team currently operates and functions, and that proposal is going to fail. But you're hesitating to speak up because you're not certain of your role yet, and then you don't speak up, and then that project fails. That's on you. Like it or not, that failure is on you because you didn't speak up. You knew, but you didn't speak. So we cannot wait to feel like we know all the facts before we speak up and start using our voice and owning our seat at the table. It's a common pitfall. You got to pull yourself out of it if you're sitting in that space. It just doesn't work. You're not executing correctly. You're not performing at your highest level and using just the knowledge you already have if you're waiting to know all the facts before you speak up. Another common pitfall that I see regularly is that you have to, again, fully understand what you need to be doing in your role before you go and build relationships, right? You start digging into the knowledge portion of the role before you start building relationships and figuring out how to drive influence through others, right? Be it that you're not building a relationship with your team, the people that report to you, you're not building relationships with peers, or you're not building relationships with other senior leaders in order to be able to influence all of those individuals at some point. You have to understand that as an executive, like it or not, the executive role at this point is getting stuff done through other people. And the way that you get things done through other people is through your ability to influence. Well, the only way that you can influence someone is that you have a relationship, that they trust whatever you're sharing, and you trust them, right? Well, you can't build trust if you don't have a relationship. So you've got to go out and build the relationships so that you can have trust, you can have rapport, then you can drive influence and drive change. Knowledge isn't going to drive change. Like it or not, executives, it's a lot like being a politician. And I know that as soon as that came out of my mouth, you went, right? You may have done that just a little bit. I respect that. But let's think about politicians. Do they actually ever physically do anything? No. What do? They build relationships, they influence, they negotiate, they use strategy, and they drive change and make progress and move things forward based on their ability to influence and negotiate and through the relationships that they've created. An executive must do the same thing. people don't care how much you know. You've got to know enough to go and drive influence and change. You can learn the key things that you need to know along the way, but you've got to go build these relationships. That is the highest commodity in the executive ranks, relationships. So you can't wait to build them. You've got to go do it now. Now look, there are about 10 common pitfalls that happen commonly as we're stepping into the executive ranks that will prevent us from building a really strong executive brand that will then therefore prevent us from executing correctly. We've covered the top 3 at this point, okay? The top 3. So this is what I see most commonly. These are the 3 most common reasons why women are not building their executive brand. They're not creating it effectively. And then they either start struggling and then they start scrambling, or they decide that the executive ranks isn't for them and they'd rather go back to that professional seat. And there's no wrong answer here, but what I will tell you is you're fully capable of avoiding or eliminating these common pitfalls because 1, you're aware of them now, and 2, you can just create your executive brand knowing that these 3 components have nothing to do with your executive brand. Nothing to do with it. You've got to go back and create your ideal brand based off of executive level leadership, right? Remember from last week, executive level leadership, knowing those strategies, using your gifts and talents in a way that only you can, and then adding the highest level of value as defined by the organization. As long as you know those things and you're building your brand around those 3 components, then you're going to avoid these pitfalls because you're naturally going to understand, oh, the company needs this. Oh, this role, to be successful, I have to do that. And you build your brand around it. Don't be stuck in these pitfalls. Don't convince yourself that these perceived truths are your reality. They are not, and you've got to avoid them, okay? So grab your workbook, do the activities associated with today. It will anchor in what you've learned, right? There's some really good information in there as always. It's free, so there's no reason for you not to get it. Go ahead and download it. And again, if now, after you've listened to this, you're like, whew, I'm living in some of these pitfalls, Katrina. I've got to pull myself out. I need help with my brand. Schedule a call with me and the team. We would love to talk to you about your brand and how to move yourself forward. As always, go and be legendary.